The morning air in Yellowstone National Park hung thick with an unusual tension. Across the vast meadow dotted with towering pines and ancient Douglas firs, a scene of primal desperation was unfolding. The golden light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the pale green grass where a heavily pregnant gray wolf lay in distress. Her name was Luna, and she had been laboring for hours. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, her body convulsing with contractions that brought no relief, no progress. The pain etched itself into every movement, every low whimper that escaped her throat. Her once proud and powerful frame now trembled with exhaustion. Nearby, pacing in tight, frantic circles, was Titan, the massive male wolf, Luna's lifelong mate, moved with increasing agitation. His thick silver and black coat bristled with anxiety. Every few moments he would approach Luna, lowering his enormous head to nudge her gently, as if trying to will her strength back into existence. But there was nothing he could do. This was a battle waged inside her body, an enemy he could not see or fight. His powerful jaws, capable of bringing down an elk, were useless here. His protective instincts screamed at him to act, yet he was rendered completely helpless. The bond they shared, forged over years of hunting together, raising previous litters and surviving the harsh Yellowstone winters, was being tested in the cruelest way imaginable. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, its warmth doing nothing to ease the cold grip of fear that had settled over the clearing. Luna's struggles were growing weaker. Her contractions, once powerful and rhythmic, were becoming irregular and feeble. Titan's pacing grew more desperate. He threw his head back and released a howl, a sound that carried across the valley, a cry of anguish that echoed off the distant mountains. It was a sound of pure helplessness, a king of the wilderness brought to his knees by something he could not control. The other creatures of the forest seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Can you imagine the desperation Titan must have felt in that moment? What would you do if someone you loved was suffering and you were powerless to help? But fate had not abandoned them entirely. In the distance, barely audible at first, came the low rumble of an engine. A dust-covered park ranger truck wound its way along the narrow trail that cut through the forest. Behind the wheel sat Marcus, a seasoned wildlife ranger who had spent the better part of 20 years patrolling these vast wilderness areas. His weathered face and calloused hands told stories of countless encounters with the wild, of rescues and relocations, of battles against poachers and the relentless forces of nature. This morning was supposed to be a routine patrol, checking water sources and looking for signs of illegal activity. Instead, it was about to become something far more extraordinary. Marcus had developed an instinct over the years, a sixth sense that told him when something was wrong. As he drove past a dense cluster of pines, that instinct suddenly flared to life. He cut the engine and sat in silence, listening. At first there was nothing. Then he heard it, a low, mournful howl that sent a chill down his spine. It was a sound he had heard before, but never quite like this. This was not a hunting call or a territorial warning. This was distress, pure and raw. He grabbed his binoculars from the passenger seat and stepped out of the truck, moving quietly through the underbrush. Years of experience had taught him to move like a ghost through the forest, his boots barely making a sound on the carpet of pine needles. Within minutes he reached the edge of the clearing, and what he saw made his heart sink. Through the magnified lenses he could clearly see the pregnant wolf, her sides heaving with effort, her body twisted in obvious pain. And there, circling her with increasing desperation, was one of the largest male wolves he had ever seen in Yellowstone. Marcus immediately recognized the signs. He had seen this before in other animals: protracted labor, a condition where the birthing process stalls and both mother and offspring are placed in mortal danger. In the wild, this almost always ended in tragedy. Without intervention, Luna would die and her unborn pups with her. But intervention meant getting close, dangerously close, to not just one wolf but two, one of whom was clearly in a protective and potentially aggressive state. His mind raced through the options: He could call for backup, but by the time a full team arrived, it would likely be too late. He could attempt to dart the male first, remove the immediate threat, but that would take precious time and might provoke an attack before the tranquilizer took effect. Or he could take the biggest risk of his career and approach directly, hoping that somehow, some way, the male wolf would understand that he was there to help, not harm. Marcus made his decision. He returned to his truck and retrieved his medical kit, a bright red case filled with emergency supplies, and his dart gun, carefully loading it with a precisely measured dose of tranquilizer. The dosage was critical, strong enough to immobilize Luna for transport, but gentle enough not to harm the unborn pups. He checked his radio one more time, making sure it was set to the emergency channel, then took a deep breath and began his approach. Every step felt like walking on a tightrope stretched over a canyon. His eyes never left Titan, watching for any sign of aggression, any indication that the wolf was about to charge. But something remarkable was happening. As Marcus emerged from the tree line, moving slowly and deliberately into the clearing, Titan stopped his pacing. The massive wolf turned to face this intruder, his lips pulling back slightly to reveal formidable teeth, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But he did not charge. Instead, he stood his ground, his eyes locked on Marcus, his body tense but not launching forward. Marcus kept his movements slow and non-threatening. He spoke in a low, calm voice, words that the wolf could not understand but might respond to in tone. He was close now, dangerously close, less than 30 feet from Luna. Titan took a step forward, positioning himself between Marcus and his mate, but still he held back. It was as if some deep, primal part of the wolf's brain recognized that this human, unlike the others who might have threatened them, was not there to hunt or harm. This was different. This was something else entirely. What do you think was going through Titan's mind in that impossible moment? Marcus raised the dart gun slowly, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took careful aim at Luna's flank, the area with the most muscle mass where the dart would be most effective and least dangerous. He squeezed the trigger. The soft pop of the compressed air gun was followed by the sight of the dart embedding itself into Luna's side. She barely reacted, too exhausted and consumed by pain to register this new sensation. Within seconds, the tranquilizer began to take effect. Her movements slowed, her head lowered, and finally her body went still, her breathing deep and regular. The most dangerous moment had arrived. Marcus had just shot the male wolf's mate. By every rule of the wild, Titan should have attacked immediately, defending Luna with everything he had. Marcus braced himself, his hand instinctively moving to the canister of bear spray on his belt. But the attack never came. Titan stood there, his massive body trembling, his eyes moving between Marcus and Luna. A sound emerged from his throat, not a growl of aggression but something else, something that sounded almost like a whimper of confusion and fear. Marcus seized the moment. He moved quickly to Luna's side, kneeling beside her unconscious form. His hands worked with practiced efficiency, checking her pulse, examining her swollen abdomen, assessing her condition. She was in bad shape, severely dehydrated and exhausted. The pups inside her were still alive. He could feel their movement, but they were running out of time. He needed to get her to the Yellowstone Wildlife Medical Center, and he needed to do it now. Throughout this entire examination, Titan remained close, so close that Marcus could have reached out and touched him. The wolf watched every movement, his golden eyes tracking Marcus's hands as they moved over Luna's body. There was something profound happening in this moment, a bridge being built between two vastly different species, constructed not from words or understanding but from pure, desperate need. Titan seemed to sense, in whatever way a wolf could sense such things, that this human was trying to save his family. Marcus pulled out his radio and called for immediate assistance. Within minutes, the response came through. A specialized wildlife transport team was en route from the medical center, 15 minutes out, Marcus acknowledged and returned his attention to Luna, administering IV fluids to combat the dehydration and monitoring her vital signs. Every moment counted now. He glanced up at Titan, who had settled into a sitting position just a few feet away, his gaze never leaving Luna. The wait felt eternal, though in reality it was less than 20 minutes. Marcus heard the approaching vehicles before he saw them. 2 trucks emerged from the forest trail, one equipped with a specialized stretcher and hydraulic lift system designed for large animals. Jake, Marcus's longtime friend and fellow ranger, jumped out of the lead vehicle, followed by 2 veterinary technicians from the medical center. They took in the scene with professional calm, though Marcus could see the surprise in their eyes when they noticed Titan sitting so close. Jake approached cautiously, speaking in a low voice. The team moved efficiently, unfolding the heavy-duty stretcher and positioning it beside Luna's unconscious form. This was the moment of truth. Moving Luna meant physically separating her from Titan, loading her onto a vehicle and driving away. Would the male wolf allow it? Or would his protective instincts finally override whatever strange understanding had been established? The team worked together, carefully rolling Luna onto the stretcher and securing the straps. She was heavy, easily over 100 pounds, and it took all 4 of them to lift her onto the truck's bed. Throughout the entire process, Titan remained seated, but his body was rigid with tension. A continuous low growl emanated from his chest. Not quite a threat, but definitely a warning. His eyes followed every movement, every person who touched his mate. The stretcher was secured. Jake gave Marcus a questioning look, asking without words whether they should attempt to drive Titan away or sedate him as well. Marcus shook his head. Something told him that wouldn't be necessary. He walked slowly to the driver's side of the transport vehicle, his eyes still on Titan. The wolf stood as the engine started, taking a few steps forward, his ears pinned back against his head. But he did not attack the vehicle. He did not try to prevent their departure. As the transport vehicle began to move slowly across the clearing toward the forest trail, something extraordinary happened. Titan began to follow. Not with the aggressive pursuit of a predator chasing prey, but with the deliberate, determined pace of a guardian. He trotted behind the vehicle, maintaining a distance of about 20 feet, his powerful legs eating up the ground with ease. When the vehicle picked up speed on the smoother trail, Titan broke into a loping run, his silver coat flashing in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the trees. Marcus, following in his own truck behind the transport vehicle, watched in amazement. This was unprecedented. He had seen animals follow vehicles before, usually out of curiosity or territorial defense, but never like this. Titan was not trying to attack or stop them. He was simply refusing to be separated from his family. The wolf's determination was absolute, his focus unwavering. Mile after mile as they wound through the forest trails toward the medical center, Titan followed. The journey took nearly 40 minutes, the vehicles forced to travel slowly over the rough terrain. Titan never gave up, never fell behind. By the time they reached the outskirts of the Yellowstone Wildlife Medical Center, a modern facility located at the transition point between dense forest and open park infrastructure, the wolf was panting heavily, his tongue lolling out, but his pace had not slowed. The transport vehicle pulled through the main gates of the facility, a chain-link fence topped with security measures designed to keep wild animals out and rehabilitating ones in. The gates closed automatically behind them. Jake, Marcus, and the medical team expected Titan to stop at the fence, perhaps pace along it for a while before eventually returning to the forest. Instead, the massive wolf did something that left them all speechless. He walked right up to the fence line, chose a spot beneath a large ponderosa pine just outside the gates, and lay down. His head rested on his paws, his eyes fixed unwaveringly on the building where his mate had been taken. He was not leaving. He was waiting. Marcus stood at the fence, looking down at Titan. The wolf looked back at him, And in that moment, Marcus felt something he had rarely experienced in all his years working with wildlife. A genuine connection, an understanding that transcended species. This was not just instinct or territorial behavior. This was loyalty, devotion, love in its purest form. Have you ever witnessed loyalty so powerful it left you speechless? This was only the beginning of Titan's vigil. Inside the Yellowstone Wildlife Medical Center, a different kind of battle was being waged. Luna had been rushed into the surgical suite, a state-of-the-art facility equipped to handle everything from injured eagles to wounded bison. The team leader was Dr. Sarah Bennett, a veterinarian with over 15 years of experience in wildlife medicine. She had seen almost everything in her career, but even she felt the weight of this particular case. The pregnant wolf was in critical condition, and the clock was ticking. Dr. Bennett and her surgical team moved with choreographed precision. Luna was positioned on the operating table, her vital signs continuously monitored. An ultrasound confirmed what they had feared. 4 pups, all alive but showing signs of distress. Their heartbeats were weaker than they should be, their movements sluggish. Luna's body, exhausted from hours of fruitless labor, was no longer able to deliver them naturally. A cesarean section was the only option, a delicate and dangerous procedure in any animal, but especially in a wild wolf. The surgical team scrubbed in, donning sterile gowns and gloves. Dr. Bennett made the first incision with steady hands, her years of experience guiding every movement. The surgery had to be fast but precise. Every second that passed increased the risk to both Luna and her pups. The team worked in focused silence, the only sounds the soft beeping of monitors and the quiet instructions Dr. Bennett gave to her assistants. Outside in the waiting area, Marcus paced much like Titan had paced in the clearing hours earlier. Jake sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, pretending to read a wildlife management report but actually watching Marcus with concern. They had worked together long enough that Jake knew what this case meant to his friend. It was not just another rescue. It was something more, something that had touched Marcus in a way few cases ever had. Marcus kept glancing at the window that faced the front gates. From this vantage point, he could see Titan still lying beneath the pine tree, still watching the building with unwavering attention. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Titan did not move except to occasionally shift his position or lift his head to scan the area. He refused water that Marcus tried to leave near the fence. He ignored the curious glances from staff members coming and going. His entire being was focused on one thing, waiting for Luna. Inside the surgical suite, Dr. Bennett was nearing the critical moment. She had carefully opened Luna's uterus and could now see the first pup, wrapped in its amniotic sac. With gentle precision, she lifted it free, quickly clearing its airway. For a terrifying moment, there was nothing, no movement, no sound. Then, suddenly, a tiny squeak, barely audible but unmistakable. The pup was alive. A collective sigh of relief swept through the surgical team. One by one, Dr. Bennett delivered the remaining 3 pups. Each time, those agonizing seconds of silence before the first cry. Each time, the overwhelming relief when it came. 4 pups, 3 females and 1 male, all breathing, all alive. They were small, their eyes still closed, their fur damp and matted. But they were healthy. Against all odds, they had survived. The final and most critical phase now began, closing Luna's incisions and ensuring she would recover from both the prolonged labor and the major surgery. Dr. Bennett worked meticulously, her sutures precise and careful. Luna's vital signs remained stable throughout, her strong constitution serving her well even in this extreme situation. After what felt like an eternity but was actually just under 2 hours, Dr. Bennett stepped back from the table, stripping off her gloves. The first tiny mewling cry of a newborn pup pierced through the clinical atmosphere of the medical center, traveling further than anyone would have thought possible. Marcus, standing near the window, heard it. His head snapped up, and he saw Bennett emerge from the surgical suite, still in her scrubs, a tired but genuine smile on her face. She gave him a thumbs up. They had done it. Luna and all 4 pups were alive. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, an overwhelming wave of relief washing over him. He immediately looked toward the window, toward Titan. At that exact moment, as if he too had somehow heard those tiny cries or sensed the change in energy, the massive wolf lifted his head, his ears pricked forward, and then he did something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Titan released a sound. Not a howl of distress or a growl of aggression, but a soft, rumbling vocalization, almost like a chuff of acknowledgement, of relief, of understanding that somehow, impossibly, his family had been saved. Marcus walked outside, approaching the fence slowly. Titan's eyes tracked him, but the wolf did not stand or show any sign of alarm. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself closer to the wolf's level, the fence still between them. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, 2 beings from different worlds connected by a shared experience of fear, hope, and ultimate relief. Luna was moved to a recovery suite, a quiet room away from the main surgical area where she could rest undisturbed. The 4 pups were nestled against her side, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath, their small squeaks and whimpers filling the space with the unmistakable sounds of new life. Dr. Bennett checked on them every hour, monitoring for any signs of complications, but Luna was strong, stronger than they had dared hope. Her body, though exhausted, began the process of healing. Her maternal instincts kicked in immediately. Even in her groggy post-surgical state, she nuzzled her pups, positioning them so they could nurse. The days that followed established a routine that became the talk of the entire medical center and eventually the broader Yellowstone staff. Every morning, just as the sun crept over the horizon, Titan would appear at his chosen spot beneath the pine tree. He would settle in, his massive body relaxed, but his attention completely focused on the building. He would remain there throughout the entire day, occasionally standing to stretch or shift position, but never straying more than a few feet from his post. As evening fell and darkness settled over the landscape, he would finally disappear into the forest, presumably to hunt and care for his own needs. But without fail, every sunrise brought him back. Marcus made it his personal responsibility to care for Titan during this vigil. He would leave fresh water in a large basin near the fence line, always approaching slowly and speaking in low, calm tones. After a few days, when it became clear that Titan had no intention of leaving and was burning through energy with his constant vigilance, Marcus began leaving food as well. Cuts of venison from the medical center's supply, used normally for feeding recovering carnivores. At first, Titan ignored the offerings, but hunger eventually overcame suspicion, and Marcus watched from a distance as the wolf approached cautiously, sniffed the meat, and then devoured it in quick, efficient bites. A strange bond formed during these daily interactions. Titan began to anticipate Marcus's arrival each morning. His ears would prick up at the sound of Marcus's truck, and while he never approached the fence when Marcus was there, he would watch with what almost seemed like recognition, maybe even gratitude. Marcus found himself talking to the wolf, sharing thoughts he would normally keep to himself, telling Titan about Luna's progress, about how strong the pups were getting, about how this whole experience had reminded him why he had chosen this profession in the first place. Inside, Luna continued to recover remarkably well. The surgical incisions healed cleanly, showing no signs of infection. Her appetite returned with a vengeance, and she ate with the determination of a mother who knew she needed strength to care for her newborns. The pups thrived, their tiny bodies growing noticeably day by day. Their squeaks became louder, more insistent. By the end of the first week, their eyes began to open, revealing the cloudy blue color that would eventually sharpen and change to the gold or amber typical of their species. Dr. Bennett was amazed by the entire situation. She had overseen countless wildlife recoveries, but this case was unique. The medical success was one thing, but the story of Titan's vigil, his unwavering loyalty, had captured something deeper. It reminded everyone at the center why they did this difficult, often heartbreaking work. Animals were not just biological machines driven by instinct. They formed bonds, felt emotions, demonstrated loyalty and love in ways that mirrored the most noble human qualities. News of Titan's vigil spread beyond the medical center. Other rangers on patrol would sometimes detour to catch a glimpse of the wolf who waited faithfully for his family. Photographers with long lenses captured images from respectful distances, pictures that would eventually appear in wildlife magazines and online forums, inspiring thousands of people around the world. But through it all, Titan remained focused on his singular purpose. He was not there for recognition or admiration. He was there because his family was inside those walls, and he would not abandon them. As the days stretched into weeks, Marcus began to prepare for what would eventually have to happen. Luna and the pups could not stay at the medical center indefinitely. They were wild animals, and their place was in the forest, living the life they were born to live. But the timing had to be perfect. Luna needed to be fully healed, and the pups needed to be strong enough to survive the transition. Dr. Bennett estimated it would take at least a month, maybe a bit longer. True to her prediction, 4 weeks after that desperate morning in the clearing, Dr. Bennett gave her final approval. Luna was completely healed, the surgical site barely visible beneath her thick fur. The pups were healthy, active, and nursing well. They had begun to explore their recovery suite, their tiny legs growing steadier each day, their play fighting already showing hints of the predators they would become. It was time to go home. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions as he prepared for the return journey. Joy that this family would be reunited and return to the wild where they belonged. Sadness that this extraordinary chapter was coming to a close, and nervousness about what would happen when Titan, who had waited so faithfully, was finally reunited with Luna and met his pups for the first time. Would his instincts accept these young that he had never seen born, never scented in their first moments of life? Or would the month-long separation have broken something fundamental? The morning chosen for the return was clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect Yellowstone day that reminded people why this place was considered sacred. Marcus oversaw every detail of the preparation. Luna was given a mild sedative, just enough to keep her calm during transport, but not enough to impair her significantly. The pups were placed in a specially designed carrier with soft bedding and ventilation. Jake and the transport team loaded everything carefully into the vehicle. When they were ready to depart, Marcus walked one last time to the fence line. Titan was there, as he had been every day for the past month. But this morning was different. The wolf was standing, not lying down. His entire body was tense with anticipation, as if he somehow knew that today was the day. His eyes followed Marcus with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Marcus spoke to him one final time, words of thanks, of admiration, of goodbye. Then he turned and walked to his truck, leading the convoy that would return this family to the wilderness. The journey back to the clearing where this had all begun took the same 40 minutes. But this time there was no Titan running behind the vehicle. He was already ahead of them, having vanished into the forest the moment the gates opened, moving with the speed and purpose of an animal who knew exactly where he needed to be. When the convoy arrived at the clearing, pulling to a stop at the same spot where Marcus had first made his desperate intervention, Titan was waiting. He stood at the far edge of the meadow, partially concealed in the shadow of a massive Douglas fir, his golden eyes locked on the transport vehicle. The moment had arrived. Marcus and Jake carefully unloaded Luna, who was awake and alert now, her dark eyes scanning the familiar surroundings of her territory. The pups were brought out in their carrier, set gently on the ground. Marcus opened the carrier door, then stepped back, way back, giving this family the space they needed. Luna emerged fully from the vehicle, stretching her legs, rolling her shoulders, breathing in the scent of the forest she had been separated from for so long. Then she turned her attention to the carrier, to the 4 tiny wolves who were cautiously emerging, their small noses twitching as they experienced the vast world for the first time. From across the clearing, Titan moved. He stepped out of the shadows into the full sunlight, his silver coat gleaming. His approach was slow, measured, each paw placed with deliberate care. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment that would answer the question that had haunted them all. Would Titan accept his family, or would the separation have severed the bonds that held them together? Luna saw him and went completely still. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Then Luna moved toward him, her gait slow but purposeful. They met in the center of the clearing, these 2 wolves who had been torn apart by crisis and brought back together by an extraordinary chain of events. Titan lowered his head, and Luna did the same. They touched, nose to nose, a greeting that lasted several long seconds. Then Titan moved his head to Luna's neck, nuzzling her fur, breathing in her scent, reaffirming the bond that had never truly broken. But the true test was still to come. The pups, emboldened by their mother's calm, had ventured a few steps away from the carrier. They huddled together, their tiny bodies pressed against each other for security, their eyes wide as they stared at the enormous male wolf. Titan turned his attention to them. He took a step closer. The pups instinctively shrank back, a natural fear response to something so much larger than themselves. Titan stopped, lowering his body to the ground, making himself smaller, less threatening. Then he crawled forward on his belly, moving with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful predator. He reached the first pup, the small male, and extended his muzzle. The pup trembled, but did not run. Titan sniffed carefully, learning the pup's scent, imprinting it into his memory. Then, with extraordinary care, he touched his nose to the pup's head, the softest of contacts, an acceptance, a welcome. He repeated this process with each of the 3 female pups, taking his time, showing them that he was not a threat, but their protector. Finally, Titan stood and walked back to Luna. The 2 adult wolves touched again, a brief moment of connection. Then Titan turned and walked a short distance away, settling into a resting position with a clear view of the entire clearing. Luna moved to the pups, nuzzling them and guiding them with gentle nudges. The family portrait was complete. 4 tiny pups, their mother recovered and strong, and their father standing watch, ready to protect them against any threat the wild might throw at them. Marcus watched from beside his truck, tears streaming freely down his face now. Jake stood beside him, his own eyes suspiciously bright. They had witnessed something that few people ever get to see, the raw, unfiltered power of familial love in the animal kingdom, proof that the bonds of family, the drive to protect and nurture, exist across all species, connecting humans and animals in ways that transcend words or understanding. Which of the 4 pups do you think will grow up to be the strongest? The story could have ended in tragedy, but instead it became a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Marcus had not just saved a wolf that day in the clearing, he had saved a future, preserved a family, and participated in something miraculous. As the sun began to set over Yellowstone, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus and Jake prepared to leave. They took one last look at the wolf family, now resting together in a tight group. The pups nursing while Luna watched over them, and Titan maintained his protective vigil. It was perfect. It was natural. It was exactly how it was meant to be. Marcus started his truck, the engine breaking the peaceful silence. At the sound, Titan lifted his head and looked directly at Marcus. For several long seconds their eyes met across the distance. Marcus raised his hand in a small wave, a gesture of farewell and gratitude. Titan held his gaze for another moment, then lowered his head back to his paws, content. The drive back to the medical center was quiet, both men lost in their own thoughts. They had just been part of something extraordinary, a story that would be told and retold, that would inspire and amaze. But more than that, they had been reminded of why they had chosen this path, why they dedicated their lives to protecting and preserving the wild places and wild creatures of the world. Luna's story became legendary within the Yellowstone Ranger community and beyond. It was a story of crisis and courage, of instinct and intelligence, of the mysterious and powerful bonds that connect all living things. It was a reminder that compassion has no boundaries, that sometimes the wildest hearts understand love and loyalty better than any human ever could. Dr. Sarah Bennett would go on to use this case in presentations and educational materials, teaching new veterinarians and wildlife professionals about the importance of taking risks when lives hung in the balance, about trusting instincts, and about the remarkable resilience of wild animals when given a chance to survive. Jake would tell the story at ranger gatherings, never failing to mention how Titan had followed the truck for miles, how he had maintained his vigil for an entire month, how he had accepted his pups with such gentleness. And Marcus returned to the clearing many times over the following months, always from a distance, always respectful of the wild space. He watched as the pups grew stronger and more adventurous, as they learned to hunt under the patient guidance of both parents, as they began to find their places within the pack structure. He saw Titan teaching the young male to stalk, saw Luna correcting the females when their play became too rough. He witnessed a family thriving, living the life they had so nearly been denied. On one of these visits, several months after the rescue, Marcus was observing from his usual distant vantage point when something unexpected happened. Titan, who was resting while the pups played nearby, suddenly stood and looked directly toward Marcus's location. The distance was too great for the wolf to have seen him clearly, but somehow Titan knew he was there. The great wolf stared in Marcus's direction for a long moment, then did something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Titan tilted his head back and released a howl long and powerful, carrying across the valley. It was not a warning or a territorial claim. It was something else, something that Marcus chose to interpret as acknowledgement, as thanks, as a final farewell between two beings who had shared an impossible moment. Marcus never saw Titan or Luna again after that day. They moved deeper into the backcountry, following the prey herds as winter approached. But sometimes on quiet evenings when Marcus was alone in the wilderness, he would hear wolves howling in the distance and wonder if one of those voices belonged to Titan or perhaps to one of the pups, now grown and starting families of their own. The thought always made him smile. The story of the wolf who waited became more than just an interesting anecdote. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the wildest places, even among the most fearsome predators, there exists a capacity for loyalty, for trust, for love, that mirrors the very best of human quality. It challenged people to reconsider their assumptions about animals, to recognize that the line between human and animal is far less clear than many believe. For Marcus, the experience changed him in ways both subtle and profound. It reinforced his belief that every life has value, that every creature deserves a chance to survive and thrive. It reminded him that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And it taught him that sometimes the greatest rewards come from the moments when we choose compassion over caution, when we extend ourselves beyond our comfort zones to help those who cannot help themselves. Years later, when Marcus would retire from the ranger service, he would look back on his long career with pride. He had seen countless beautiful things, had helped preserve and protect one of America's greatest natural treasures. But when people asked him about his most memorable experience, He always came back to that morning in the clearing, to the desperate lioness who became a wolf named Luna, to the loyal mate named Titan, and to the 4 tiny pups whose lives hung in the balance. It was, he would say, the moment when he truly understood what it meant to be a guardian of the wild. The legacy of that day extended beyond just those directly involved. The story inspired increased funding for wildlife medical facilities, led to improved protocols for handling wildlife emergencies, and sparked countless discussions about the emotional lives of animals and the ethical responsibility humans have toward the natural world. Schools used the story to teach children about empathy and courage. Conservation groups used it to demonstrate why protecting wild spaces and the creatures that inhabit them matters so much. But perhaps the most important legacy was the simplest one. Luna survived. Her pups grew strong. Titan fulfilled his role as protector and father. A family that should have been lost was given a second chance, and they seized it with all the fierce determination that wild things possess. They lived, they thrived, they contributed to the great ongoing story of life in Yellowstone National Park. And somewhere in those vast forests, their descendants still run, carrying in their genes the story of the wolf who waited and the humans who cared enough to help. It is a story without end, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, the unbreakable bonds of family, and the truth that when we open our hearts to the natural world, we discover that we are not separate from it, but an integral part of its grand, beautiful, tragic, and triumphant tapestry. This story is more than just about survival. It's about the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, and how sometimes they don't just share our lives, they save them.